Vladimir Putin, Russia's president, dragged his nation into the bloody Ukrainian conflict a year ago, reigniting a global standoff with Western nations. In the previous 12 months, it is estimated that close to 200,000 Russian soldiers have died or been injured. As many as 1 million Russians or more have reportedly left their country in order to avoid political persecution, conscription, or hopelessness. Unprecedented sanctions have hit Russia's economy, cutting it off from a large portion of the global banking system and cutting it off from Europe. On the surface, however, it may appear that not much has changed in Moscow. The Russian capital still has sparkling street decorations and is crowded with people in its shops and eateries. Though many of the top brands in the world, including Apple and H&M, have left, their products are still widely available. At the beginning of the war, police put an end to a few brief protests. Today, they are all but non-existent. The majority of independent media has been forced abroad, and almost all well-known political opposition figures are either imprisoned or living in exile. For a large portion of the war, many Russians' response has been to largely deny that anything is happening. If you had to describe the more common attitude in one word, I believe it would be something like acquiescence. Researcher and Russia's war author Jane McGlynn described the acquiescence as apathetic, who has been examining Russians' attitudes toward the conflict told ABC News. According to a recent article by senior fellow at the Carnegie Center Andriy Kolesnikov, Russian society has assumed the fetal position. It has become challenging to assess public attitudes toward the war in Russia based on polling because of the Kremlin's crackdown on dissent. According to McGlynn, however, Russians are receptive to the broad framing of the conflict by Putin and regime propaganda, which portrays Russia as defending itself against a hostile NATO, Ukrainians as helpless Western puppets, and Russia as a partially dependent neighbor of Ukraine. I believe the stories have resonance. I believe that these stories have always been jointly created, she stated. The Kremlin's most aggressive plans, like capturing Kiev, are actively and enthusiastically supported by a much smaller percentage of Russians. McGlynn asserted, I think we are definitely talking about less than 10% of the population. That group includes longtime nationalist activist Dmitry Popov. He declared, Ukrainian people and us are one nation. These days, propaganda and the media deceive a lot of people. Popov and other volunteers have been gathering supplies to send to both the civilians and Russian troops in the currently occupied portion of Ukraine. He was packing barrels last week that had been converted into mobile stoves that soldiers could use in their trenches. In an ideal world, I firmly believe that Kiev would be the best place to put an end to neo-Nazism. In all these cities, ideally, we should also be in Lvov and Ivano-Frankivsk, he said, referring to the western cities of Ukraine. To tell the truth to the people there first, before anything else. Many people in Moscow have covered their cars with Z stickers, a pro-war emblem. Many people welcome the assertion that Russia is defending oppressed Russian speakers and that Kiev started the war. However, experts claim that people's support is only superficial and quickly changes when they are asked to make significant sacrifices. Hundreds of thousands of Russian men of military age fled the country as a result of the disastrous retreats in Ukraine and Putin's military mobilization in the autumn. After that, a poll conducted in November by the Levada Center, the only independent polling organization in Russia, revealed that 57% of Russians preferred peace negotiations to extend the war, while only 27% preferred it to continue. Because, for the time being, despite being severely damaged by Western sanctions, Russia's economy has fared better than anticipated. The Kremlin has found it easier to shield Russians from the war. Many of the most well-known international brands made withdrawal announcements as soon as the war started. As a result, some malls had vacant storefronts for a while, as retailers like Zara and H&M closed their doors. More than 1,000 foreign businesses have announced they are leaving or halting operations in Russia, according to researchers at Yale University. However, the majority of premium brands are once more readily available, being sold by resellers who import them from Turkey and other countries after buying them abroad. iPhones and H&M clothing are readily available. Russian companies have purchased some brands and have openly reopened them under new names. Some Starbucks cafes were acquired by a rap star who was amenable to the Kremlin, who then rebranded them as Stars. McDonald's was reopened by a different businessman as Tasty. Full stop. According to the World Bank and the IMF, Russia's economy has shrunk by a range of 4.5% to as little as 2.2%. The IMF predicts it could even experience a very slight 0.3% growth. I believe that prices have increased. If not, I can't claim to have noticed it on a Moscow shopping street, a woman who identified herself only as Oksana told ABC News. Fear supports the Kremlin's narratives as well. With the passage of recent legislation, criticizing the war is now technically against the law, punishable by fines and possibly lengthy prison terms. This month, a Russian court sentenced journalist Maria Ponomarenko to 6 years in prison for writing on social media that civilians in Mariupol were bombed in a theater by Russian military jets. A small act of dissent was carried out last week at a gathering in Moscow when about 20 people wrote letters to political prisoners. 18-year-old Maxim Litkin was there. He has staged one-man demonstrations and was frequently detained for holding signs that denounced Putin and the conflict. We must discuss the war crimes committed in Ukraine, he said. Russia cannot exist without honest people. Police raided Litkin's home and took him into custody a few days after ABC spoke with him. He was accused of disseminating allegedly fake information that tarnished Russia's armed forces, a new offense that carries a maximum 10 to 15-year prison sentence. Criticism has started to surface in previously unlikely places due to the magnitude of Russia's losses and the chaos of mobilization. For 11 months, Irina Chistykova has been looking for her son Kirill. She thinks he was taken prisoner of war in Kharkiv, Ukraine, in April of last year. Despite Putin's assurances that conscripts would not be sent to Ukraine in large numbers, thousands have, including Chistykova's son. I was raised in the USSR and I follow the law. I have been trained to respect those in positions of authority, ABC News was told by Chistykova. So, in April, I had faith in them. But by June, I had given up on them. Chistykova is a member of a group of mothers who have publicly criticized the leadership of Russia for the conduct of the war and the treatment of the military. According to the Council of Soldiers' Mothers and Wives, 20,000 mothers participate in the organization. Olga Tsukhanova, the group's founder, gained attention last year when she publicly criticized Vladimir Putin on social media and called him a coward for refusing to meet with group members. She and Chistykova both claimed that since then, security agents had been stalking them and that Tsukhanov had been arrested by police. They are essentially shutting mothers' mouths, she said. These techniques have been employed for years, but without considering the fact that everything has a limit. According to Tsukhanova, Putin's so-called special military operation is starting to increase Russian social engagement. She did not, however, state that she thought Russia was to blame for the war itself. I have faith in my people, she declared. Whatever they say about us, Russia is not an aggressor. We were never aggressors.